Today we have the great honor of having one of the world's greatest humanitarians and one of the world's most sensitive souls. He's come from France, Father Patrick Desboise. Many of you have seen him on 60 Minutes and many news outlets, and many of you have read his books, Holocaust by Bullets and In Broad Daylight, his newest work. For over the last 20 years, Father Desboise has been going from town to town in the Ukraine, the Baltic states, White Russia, the former Soviet Union, and he's been going from town to town interviewing people who today are elderly, who today, remembering events of their childhood, and demarcating mass graves of the annihilation of the Jewry of the Baltics, Ukraine, former Soviet Union, and White Russia. Those two books, In Broad Daylight and Holocaust by Bullets, are a must-read. Today, Father Desboise is spending a good part of his time in Iraq, and he is right now demarcating the tragedies, the destruction of the Yazidis, of other groups of Shia at the hands of the Islamic State. And what he has done for the Jewish people and for Jewish history, he is doing today for Iraqi history. At this point, we want to thank the Father for coming, for speaking with us. And we're going to ask the Father a number of questions about the holy work, about the profound work that he and his organization, Yachad in Unum, have been doing over the last 2 decades. Father, thank you.
Thank you to you. It's an honor to be here.
Father, would you like to share with us, to a degree, how you've got into this work, what motivated you?
It has always been, and it stays until now, a family story, I would say, because my grandfather, his name was Claudius Desboise, he was deported in July 42 from France to Ukraine as non-Jew, and in a camp with 25,000 French. And he came back, and when I was a child, I wanted to know what happened in Ravaruska. The name was Ravaruska. And he never accepted to speak. He spoke to nobody in the family. We didn't even know in which country it was. And when we were speaking of that, he kept silence, and my grandma was crying. So one day I took him separately in a room, and I asked him, why you don't speak? I said, perhaps you did something bad. Perhaps you killed somebody. He was very upset. He told me, no, I was in a camp. We had no food, no drink, but outside the camp was worse than a camp. And me as a child, I couldn't understand at the period what could be worse than a camp. And so he passed away, unfortunately, when I was 17. And one day I went back to Poland, and I lost my road. And by hazard or not hazard, I was near Ravaruska. And in 1 second, I understood Holocaust was a key of my life. I was already a classic priest in a parish. And I decided to study Holocaust. I went in Yad Vashem 7 times. And after 7 times, I say, okay, it didn't happen in Yad Vashem. It happened in Ravaruska. So I went back to Ravaruska, and I tried to find the mass grave. It was at the period, it was Soviet time. It was really impossible. Everybody said, we don't know. We were killed in secret. I knew they shot 18,000 Jews in this village, but nobody wanted to speak. And so I came back and came back until I found the first mass grave.
How many times did it take you to find that, and how many trips to Ravaruska?
I came, I think, at least 5, 6 times, because we were building a memorial for the French. We renovated a memorial for the Soviet, because they shot also 25,000 Soviet. And every time I ask about the mass grave of the Jews, I always say I was a nudnik of the village with only one question: where are the mass graves of the Jews? And at the period, people say, no, they killed the Jews in secret. And in every book at the period, they say that Holocaust was secret. But for me, I couldn't accept it, because in my village, we killed 2 Germans, and everybody knows it. And here it was 18,000 people. And so, thanks to election, to democracy, the Soviet lost the power. A new mayor was elected. His name was Yaroslav, and he brought me in a forest with 50 farmers that he found were present at the killing of the last Jews of Ravaruska. And that's the key date for me.
In the Father's book, In Broad Daylight, and as well in his first book, Holocaust by Bullets, the Father, through interviews, finds the details, the participation of the Ukrainian locals, of the Ukrainian police? Who provided the planks? Who provided the wagons? Who was involved in the deportation of the Jews from the town in the ghetto to the site of the mass grave? Who cooked for the Nazis? Who did the killing? This book in broad daylight is a must-read. One can get this in any bookstore or on Amazon. And in what the father did in a very scientific, serious, investigative way was find out the details in community after community and hundreds of communities that he has researched. Father, could we ask you about a couple of the communities?
Yeah, we crossed now villages. We have I think crossed 2,700 extermination sites, and we have filmed 5,700 villagers who were present at the killing of the Jews. And so the killing site can be small. It can be a family. I remember in one village, they have killed the mother, and the father was begging in the street with the children because he had no food. He was the last Jew of the village. And at the end, he couldn't survive. So he went to Gestapo. He said, do it, shoot me. So they brought him in the forest and they forced him to dig the mass grave for his children. And they buried all of them under a tree. And it took me 1 day to find this mass grave. And I remember my team say, oh, you know, it's only one family. And I say, you know, if it was your father, if it was your brother, would you say that? So we have small mass graves like that, but unfortunately we have huge mass graves like in Belarus, Branaya Gora, where more than 40,000 people in one place. It was the Jews from Brest-Litovsk that they told them they bring them to Palestine. They took a train, and after 1 hour of train, there was no Palestine, no camp, only 13 mass graves.
For those who are listening, Brest-Litovsk today you're familiar with is the city of Brisk, the great famous Jewish community. The Soloveitchik family were the rabbis there. It goes all the way back before the Maharshal. Brisk, or Brest-Litovsk, shaped and defined our whole tradition and our whole legacy. And this was the annihilation of that great community.
And so this community was taken in a ghetto, and I interviewed, by example, a prisoner. He was a prisoner during the war, a Soviet prisoner, and he was forced to clean the ghetto after every deportation to Branaya Gora. So, but even today, when you go to Brest-Litovsk or Brisk and you ask where are the Jews, it took the train. They have been sent somewhere, perhaps in Palestine, perhaps in Israel, and it was very difficult to find. And suddenly I decided, okay, let's stop with Brisk. Let's go to Branaya Gora. Branaya Gora is a small hamlet, and I knew there were 13 mass graves, so I said it's impossible. They found diggers in one village. So I turned in all the village around, and we found 7 persons were still alive, were employed to dig the mass graves. And they came, we brought them back on the place, and they explained exactly where were the mass graves, how deep they were, where they were sleeping, etc. And so we discovered the system. They brought a train. The train was stopping in front of the mass grave. They opened only one wagon at a time. They plug a fence or barbed wire to the door, and they force the Jews to go directly to the mass grave, and they shoot them. And today there is only a small memorial. Nobody comes back, and that's the tragedy of the Jews who have been shot. There are much more victims shot that killed in Auschwitz, and very few people are coming back. I think of another place. It's called Bogdanivka, and most of the Jews were from Odessa. And same thing. They took the train. They went out of the train station of Berezovka. They had to walk during 65 kilometers. So I said, it's impossible. It's impossible. It's too much. I'm sure they killed a lot of people. So we did the road, village per village, farm per farm. And now this road is very small and very destroyed. And in every farm, they stopped to kill Jews. In every farm, there was a small mass grave behind the
Which
farm.
country is this?
It's in Ukraine.
In Ukraine.
Odessa.
You, Father, you'd mentioned there were more Jews killed in the mass killings in Ukraine starting in the late summer of 41 than there were in Auschwitz.
Yeah.
And that's without the Jews killed in Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and White Russia.
That for me, a mystery because they shot the Jews in public, and nobody speaks about that today. And Auschwitz was secret, and everybody speaks about Auschwitz. So I think unconsciously, the people who are in the legacy of Hitler, they say, one time, one old Polish man, highly present in the government, it was in Soviet time, he told me Hitler made a mistake. I say, which mistake? He killed the Jews in Auschwitz. I say, why is it a mistake? He told me because the Jews are coming back. When they kill them in forests, they never came back. So it took me many years to understand. And you know, the first time I visited Babi Yar, it was also under Soviet time. So there were no Jewish memorial, only a
Just for the listeners, the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah 1941, 33,400 Jews were murdered in the ravine known as Babi Yar outside the capital of Kiev, Ukraine. Sorry.
And so I remember it was a big meeting with the World Jewish Congress. So there were 300 people. I was the only non-Jews. And it was a Soviet woman guiding. So she brought us to the ravine, and she said, here they shot the Jews. So I approached her secretly and I said, how do you know? And she only answered this terrible answer. She told me, you don't see how the trees are green. So in Soviet time, it was impossible to know where was the mass grave, where was the Kever Chaim. It was absolutely impossible. And people didn't speak and make only allusions, even in the biggest site. But suddenly they spoke. And it's a place very dear to your heart where I understood that it was public. It was in Medjugorje. I was in Medjugorje, so where there is a tomb of the Baal Shem Tov. And suddenly, 17 farmers wanted to speak. And I had only one day to make interview, like today with camera. And I was surprised, so I organized benches, but because they were old, to wait. And I couldn't, I say, how is it that 17 people want to speak? And one lady, she opened me the door. She said, I was a little girl, a girl from Medjugorje, and she said, you know, for the first execution of the Jews, we could get a good place. But for the second one, no, we didn't get a good place. We couldn't see everything. So I say, come on, where from you were? So she told me, I saw from my home. So I said, let's go to your home. I said, Mom, it's impossible. From your windows, you don't see the extermination site. And she told me, I didn't tell you the truth. My mom came back from the market, and she said, we have to suit well, because they kill the Jews. So she suited the children, and they went to see the shootings. And the problem, what I try to explain in the book, it's difficult for me as a Christian, of course. She was thinking it was the last day of the world, because the Jews were dying among the Christians, assassinated by an army from outside. And she was thinking it was a revenge of Hashem against the death of Jesus. And so, she always said that, and she said, I cried a lot, we cried a lot. And I say, so why did you stay if you cried a lot? And she told me a phrase that I heard many times, you know, it was interesting for the children. And now I think I have heard hundreds of people from Ukraine, Belarus, any country, to say interesting for it. So they were sure they were not Jews, they were not gypsy, they were not communists, they were not partisan. So there was no risk. So they went to watch the death of the Jews in front of them. So it's why we can investigate, because now they are not afraid to speak, but we must never forget Jews have been killed in broad daylight in the gathering of all the village. It was not one farmer hidden in a tree. It was, no, it was everybody. It was like a show. It was like a carnival to kill the Jews.
And you're saying that's not only in Ukraine, that was true in the Baltics?
In every country. People are running to watch. We just come back from a village. It was 2 weeks ago. And the German made a special system. They killed the Jews a Sunday during the Mass. It's unique. We never got that. It was in Ukraine also. I don't remember the name of the village because I was not in this investigation. And so they knock at the door of the priest during the Mass, and they say, finish the Mass, don't go out, because for 2 hours we kill the Jews. They took some music instrument to make noise, to say we begin to kill the Jews. They killed the Jews during 2 hours. After 2 hours, they said to Jews, now it's finished, you can go back home. And they say to the church, next Sunday. I say that because people cannot understand how much the genocide of the Jews was completely imbricated in the daily life of the church, of the market, of the job. Nothing stops, nobody stops what he's doing during the killing. It don't even stop. We don't stop the Mass, you don't stop. I found only one farmer who stopped working during the shooting. The others, they go on working and they watch, and they're still working. I say that because it was difficult to accept that humanity finally is very happy when they think that the bad people are dying in front of them. And you know, when you begin, you say, bad Ukrainian. When you after you say bad Polish, it's a bad Lithuanian. But when you work in 10 countries, you say it's a human question. And now that I work in Iraq, it's exactly the same, and there is no Polish and no Ukrainian and no German. So it's a human questions that we have to confront. And also it's a dangerous questions because today there are many shooting of Jews in my country. And I'm not sure all the population is sad.
You share in the book that the SS could not have done this by themselves without the help and assistance of the local townspeople, of the local police, of the local governments. Many of those local mayors and government leaders were established by the Germans after they drove out the Soviets. Would you elaborate a little bit?
It's very special in Soviet Union because in Soviet Union you could have workers for free. So they changed all the municipalities. All the mayors were pro-German. They were not German, but pro-German. But they kept the Soviet system. And so they say, by example, tomorrow we need 70 people to dig. In Soviet Union, the mayor, he writes a small paper, tomorrow 8 o'clock in front of this place, and they carry that to the farms. In Soviet Union, you had no choice. You had to go. And so, because if you refuse a job like that, you can be deported to Gulag. So without the Soviet system, Hitler could never kill all these Jews. It was impossible. He couldn't arrive in Paris or in Berlin and say, tomorrow I need 700 people to dig something. It was impossible. And so they did that village after village. And it's sure that the Germans were only with rifle and cartridges. So to dig the mass grave, to fulfill the mass grave, to sell the suits of the Jews, to bring back the suits, to bring ashes on the blood of the Jews, to clean around the mass grave, etc., etc. All that has been done with local people. The extermination machine was human. It was a human machine. And so I think we have to learn because unfortunately, on the side of Hitler, it's a huge success, you know, to have killed more than 2 million Jews, one per one, in public, in broad daylight, with all the population in every village, and quickly done in time. That's the face of evil that we have to confront, because actually the mass crimes are always like that. Nobody rebuilt in Auschwitz. Nobody. Everybody today is killing one by one. If a Jew is killed in Paris, we never look if he's in a camp. He has been killed in the street or in his house. You know, when they burned alive this survivor in Paris, Mrs. Knoll, she has been burned alive, stabbed 11 times, and even cut the throat in her apartment. So it's why I insist a lot to say we have to study Holocaust as a crime with a name of criminal, with name of victim, with evidences, because it was a personal crime. The Jews have not been killed by a tsunami. And the Germans were not alone, never, in no country. So it's why I established, I would say, my book is to rebuild the crime from morning to night and to say who was doing what, who was cooking. For example, the Germans, they want to eat in time. They have an obsession with the chrono. So when they arrive in the village in the morning, they want to see the municipality, they want to see the police, they want to see the diggers to check the mass grave is correct, but they want to see the cooker. And this cooker, most of them are women from the village who are Russian, very afraid, and suddenly they learn that at noon it must be ready for an amount of people, all the killers, all the police, and she has to cook most of the time the animals that they have stolen from Jewish farms. And I interviewed 3 of them. One, she was serving the food. The German wanted to have like a buffet near the mass grave. So a big buffet with food, and she was serving the food, and 2 per 2, they left the table to shoot. It was just near the mass grave. So I remember I was new, and I say how they could eat near a mass grave where people were yelling, bleeding, suffering. I say, oh, they didn't care. They did that every day. They were more worried about their food than about the death of the Jews. And this woman, she told me, was terrible. She was a young girl. She was Russian. And she said German wanted big pieces of meat, and 2 per 2 they went to shoot. And she said at the end of the lunch, it was 1,500 Jews less. So for us, it was a challenge. Now I'm being used after 15 years of investigation. But at the beginning, to understand there was a lunch, a buffet here, and a mass grave there. And that it was in the same time. So a genocide of the Jews took place in broad daylight, in the usual life of the countries. It's why anti-Semitism, when it begins to be criminal, is very dangerous, because it can gather a lot of people who say, I want to participate, I want to participate, I want to be in the game, I want to be among the killers. You know, Hitler never missed workers. He went in many countries. He was in Lithuania, in Lithuania, in Latvia, in Moldavia, in Romania, in Russia, in Belarus, in Ukraine. Never you have a complaint of the SS who say, we have nobody to kill the Jews. No, never. You must also know that in many cases, the killers have access to the belonging of the Jews. So, for example, the night before the shooting, the local police and the neighbors, they enter in a ghetto to take something. I remember I was in Belarus, and in a small city, and I interviewed an old lady. She was a very simple lady, like retired lady, seated on a bench in the middle of the city alone. And I say, you were here the day of the shooting? She said, yes. She said, you don't care I interview you in the market, because everybody was watching my interview. She said, no, I'm not afraid. I said, okay, let's go. I say, where were you the day of the killing? She said, I entered in the ghetto. I say, you entered in the ghetto the day of the killing? Yes, I did a small hole in the wall and I entered in the ghetto. I say, why did you enter in the ghetto? She said, because my husband was working for Jews. So with my husband, I emptied these houses. There were a lot of belongings. I emptied also this second house and this third house. And very quietly in front of all the village, she said that she stole all the belongings of 3 families. So a genocide is a crime. And like any crime, they wanted to kill the Jews until the last baby. They wanted all the belongings. And they wanted the girls. It's a crime. So don't think that SS was a non-profit. They never kill a family and say, I don't care the belonging, we have no time, let's kill the Jews quickly. Never.
Every community you went to, they stole and looted the Jewish assets and wealth.
Until the last coin.
And that was the Germans and the locals.
Germans and locals. Germans took the best belonging, brought back to the city, and the rest was sold by auction. Always the day after the shooting, there were a sale by auction, once a pants, once a jacket, once a shirt. And all the people of the farm say, we washed all the suits of the Jews, and it was nicely arranged, and they said after 3 days, all the village was suited in Jew. I say that because it was a crime. It was a crime, and a crime attracts people.
You spoke, in the book you wrote about the use of alcohol, as well as here you had on the one hand Nuremberg laws and racial laws and how Jewish blood is a terrible thing, but how the Germans violated many of the Jewish women.
Yeah, in Soviet Union, there was a moratorium. It was legal to rape Jewish girls. And the first time I discovered that, some historian told me it was impossible, Father, impossible. Never a SS would have touched a Jewish girl. I said, I don't know, I have many witnesses. So it was also in Brest. It was a guy, he told me he was working in the ghetto, and he told me the German entered 10 per 10 every day to rape Jewish girls in the ghetto. I say, sure, I misunderstood the translation. Can you ask again? And he repeated. And there were a lot of old people listening, and I saw they knew it. So it was, oh, I say, perhaps it's true. And when I understood really, it was in Minsk, in Belarus. I interviewed an old survivor, Jew, and he was a teenager in the ghetto of Minsk. And her family, to save him, they told him, you must say you have a leg which is broken, you are in your bed, don't move when they attack the family, to try to save yourself. So he was in a room, laying on his bed, falsely sick, and the curtains were closed. But he was a teenager. So he opened the curtains and he wanted to watch in the street. And suddenly he saw a group of Germans coming to the neighbor house, and they took a young girl, a young Jewish girl, was beautiful, and she was 14, and they raped her. And he didn't know it was a rape. He didn't even understand what happened. And the family, of course, the Jewish family, went out to save the girl, so Germans shot the family and finished the rape. And he told me a phrase I will never, never forget, because he was sent to Auschwitz after. He told me, at least in Auschwitz we could sleep the night. You imagine what it means. It means in the ghetto, every night somebody entered to rape Jewish girls. But you know, it was
You're referring to SS?
Yeah, it would be an SS, it could be a non-SS, it could be a policeman, a local policeman. Mm-hmm. And so, it was difficult, you know, to accept, because some families, many families, write to my organization, to Yachad, and ask, in which mass grave is my grandma, in which mass grave is my uncle, in which mass grave is a rabbi. If the mass grave is big, we cannot know. But if it's a small village, we can ask to the neighbors, and they will remember. They remember in which mass grave it is. But you know, sometimes we find the archives, and we found that the grandma has been raped. So it's very difficult to say to a nice family from Los Angeles or San Francisco to say. So sometimes I say, I cannot tell you everything. I have video. If you want to watch it. But me, I cannot explain you everything. So for some Jewish family, because now many Jewish families want to go back to the mass grave and say Kaddish for the first time in 42 and make their own memorial. And we help for that. We help to make the go-between, because if they go alone, nobody will speak to them. So we send somebody who is non-Jew first to establish the reality, and after we introduce the family.
Just if I could let everyone know, the organization that Father Patrick Desboise has, it's called American Friends of Yachad in Unum. Yachad is spelled Y-A-H-A-D, again, Y-A-H-A-D, I-N-U-N-U-M. Y-A-H-A-D-I-N, U-M, U-N like Nancy, U-M like Mary, and it's .org. We ask and we encourage the cost of each and every trip to go to Eastern Europe, to take a team of 10, 12 people, which is necessary. You're looking at $180,000 for each and every excursion. And it's a very significant cost. All of this goes towards the holy work that they're doing. And we ask for people to support this, to back this. If you go onto the website of Y-A-H-A-D-I-N-U-M, like Nancy, U-M like Mary, okay, .org, there's a place where one can donate. As well, in the communities, Father Patrick has served as a scholar in residence at a number of OU shuls, at a number of communities, and consistently we hear it was one of the most powerful, profound experiences they had throughout the year. All of those funds go towards this holy work. Father, if I could ask you, an area that you went to that from a historical point of view, not only the Jewish people, but history will be indebted to you, is to Belzec. For those who don't know, Operation Reinhard, the annihilation of Polish Jewry, which started in March of 42, and by September of 43, almost all of Polish Jewry had been annihilated. The 3 death camps, Treblinka, Sobibor, and Belzec. Belzec, where 452,000 Galician Jews were killed. There were only 2 survivors, 2 Jewish survivors. One was killed right after the war. We have, from the one remaining survivor, we have his eyewitness testimony. We know very little about Belzec. There was no revolt there. Most of what we know is a function of the SS guards, the SS who worked there. But Father Desboise went to Belzec. He interviewed villagers. He interviewed people who lived there, who knew what was going. Father, if you could share with us your research and your experiences.
It was the beginning of my research because Belzec is just near Ravaruska, where was my grandfather, 17 kilometers from each other. And the train station of Ravaruska was the train station where the trains were waiting to be sent to Belzec. It was like a complex. It was working together because the train station of Belzec is too small. And the train station of Ravaruska is huge. But I will never forget, it began like that. I was in Belzec a long time ago. It was still post-Soviet, not easy. And there was no memorial, an ex-Soviet memorial, no museum like today. You could see the bones outside. It was a terrible place. It was a field of bones. And I met a priest. He was old. People told me he was a priest of Belzec. I said, do you mean he was there during the war? Not permanently, because he was resident in Belzec, because his family was, so he came during holidays. So he went to his home with a Jewish friend. We had a small camera. And I will never forget, because he was, I understood all the village was climbing on the roof of houses or on a small mound to watch the entry in the gas chamber. So everybody was watching. And himself too. So I told him, and he was a normal priest. He was not a fascist. He was not an anti-Semite. He was a normal person. He took care of his life of blind people who were blind or couldn't, disabled people. And I asked him, and it was not too difficult to watch all these people die every day. I will never forget his answer. He told me it was difficult because my mother couldn't bear the smoke. So she was headache every afternoon, and I lost all my afternoon to take care of my mom. So I realized that for a normal person was just living 3-4 blocks from the gas chamber, the problem was the smoke and the headache of the mom. When we left the meeting, I was already completely in shock, and my Jewish friends, I cannot tell you, I told them keep silence because he will never speak. So we went in the corridor of the parish, was a normal corridor, and there were a collection of paintings. And I saw miniatures of painting of the entry in the gas chamber, of the burning of the corpse, of the train arriving. And I saw the date of the painting, 1944. So we asked if we took take pictures. He said yes. And I asked him when I left, because I was such in a shock, I said, who did the painting? He told me, a crazy person. And that was it. I went back to sleep. I couldn't eat. I said, it's a nightmare. Everybody was watching. So we decided to make a series of interviews. And I will never forget, I interviewed an Ukrainian lady. She was living in Belzec, because Belzec is half Polish and Ukrainian originally. And we are still Ukrainian. And she told me she was serving the bread for the SS. So, and there were 2 Jews working in the cave to load the bread. And she told me, Father, you know, I did all what I could for the German, and I don't receive any pension for that. And so her own problem was also that, to say, I work for the German during 2-3 years, I serve the bread, and I know pension. So I realized that everybody was still doing his job. Another day, another person, he had been, because they made a requisition of material, they were using the material of the village, the German. The camp was not a Polish camp. I say that for the polemic of today. It was a pure Nazi camp handled by the German. But the guards were all Ukrainian, no Polish. But they used the village. By example, suddenly they had a bombing in Belzec, and all the horses of the German died. So they wanted new horses. So they asked a big group of farmers to bring their horse.
The Soviets bombed the barn where the horses were stapled?
Yeah. And so they asked the farmers to come with their horse, and they called a veterinarian, because you know, Germans were very. And so to choose who were the best horses, they have chosen 18 horses. And they gave a ticket to the guy to say, we'll give you back your horse. and I interviewed an old farmer. He told me, I saw no train of Jews were coming anymore. It was finished, and I still don't get my horse. So I went to the camp. I knocked at the door with my ticket. I say, where is my horse? And so he said, I entered in the camp. It was finished, the camp. And he said, I saw 10 machines with Jews to vanish all the ashes because they were looking for gold teeth in the ashes. And he described all that. And so he entered in the camp after the death of the Jews, but there were still Jews working in it. So I said, they use machine? Where did they find the machine? Oh, it was normal machine we found in farms. So I could buy 2 machines that I brought for museums. It was a long time ago. What I tell you is I begin to be old. And all the material of the village was used for the camp. But it's the same thing. The camp was in broad daylight. It was not a Polish camp. It was a Nazi camp, totally Nazi camp. Because, you know, what people don't understand is that the Germans, when they killed nearly 500,000 Jews, they wanted the money. They wanted the belonging. They didn't make a distribution to the Polish and that. No, absolutely not. But they used all the village. And the worst, I interviewed the carpenter. He was building the gas chamber and before the Jews arrived. And he was building the door. He told me we put sand in the middle and so that the Jews outside will not hear the Jews yelling inside and so on and so on. And he left when the Jews arrived. He was not inside the criminal machine. And he was employed. And he told me, will I be condemned after death for what I did? And I told him, condemned for what? He told me, because I worked on Sunday. And I say, did you get the authorization from the priest? He told me, yes, but you know, he told me, Father, it was the only day we could get the salary. And so the priest, the problem was the headache of his mom with the smoke. The baker, the problem was she got no pension from the German. And the carpenter was that he was working on Sunday. So I realized a very deep human question, because you can say bad Polish, but you have the same thing in Ukraine, the same thing in Lithuania, same thing in Iraq, same thing in Syria. When there is a genocide, many people are worried about their business. They win money or they lose money. They feel well or they feel good. And so for many people, a crime is first a business. They see, they killed this 10 Jewish family. Where are the belongings? Who took the girls? So really for me, historically, it was to reestablish that, before I researched that, I was thinking that Auschwitz was a place, all the neighbors were awful with strange faces and that. And when I went there, I see everybody normal, same face, but anywhere. So I realized that all the village is attracted by the crime. And the genocide of the Jews for many people was, first of all, a good opportunity of business, of personal business. We must forget to think that all the money went back to Berlin. That's not true. It went back in the private German pockets. Many Germans sent that the belonging to their wife by the regular. By example, we found an archive. It's the wife of a chief of Einsatzgruppe, of unit of killers, and she write to her.
The phrase the Einsatzgruppe, and those were the 4 Einsatzgruppen A, B, C, and D, were the ones who went into the Baltics, White Russia, and the Ukraine, and annihilated, as Father Desboise said, close to 2 million Jews.
And she writes to her husband, my dear, this week, the carpet you sent are much too large for the apartment. So he was stealing the carpets of the Jews, sending by the regular post office. I speak of a high-rank Nazi. So for us to admit that the killers were also criminals, and they were, of course, anti-Semite, but also criminals, also raping women. So that's also the challenge of the book, to say, let's stop to think there is anything true in the topic of the Nazi. This argument of purity of blood, of that it's a pure vitrine. Behind the screen, they make business, and huge business. I cannot imagine how people became millionaires after Holocaust.
The phone number, if anyone wants to speak to anyone, in fact, Eva Schaller is the program officer of Yachad im Unum. Their phone numbers are 646 588 6789. 646 588 6789 in terms of those communities who want to bring in Father as a speaker, as a scholar in residence. And what we're doing today is literally scratching the surface of 20 years of work that the Father and his organization have been engaged in.
And also, I would say, if anybody wants to know, if they are from a small shtetl or from a small city, if they want to know what happened to their family, we can help for that, at least look in archives what we can find, and also send people before with the name of the family and the name of the business, because everybody remember where was killed the pharmacist, where was killed the guy who was selling shoes, where was killed the dentist. And it's possible to know, and I would encourage people to try to know where are their family, where they are buried, and also to say Kaddish there, because most of the time it will be this first Kaddish in 42 on the ground. I will never forget, I brought my students, I'm a professor in Georgetown, and I brought my students this year in Moldavia, and we were in a small village, and suddenly appeared a guy, 97 years old, and he said, I agree to speak to you. It was 25 American, my students from Georgetown, and he said, I was a guard, I was pre-military in a ghetto, and so we began to interview, etc. It was raining, snowing, it was a very difficult day. And finally he said, a lot of Jews died. I say, we told him, where is the mass grave? It's far away on a mount. And I say, would you accept to go there? He was 97. He said yes. He was working, he was very healthy. He walked with the students alone on the mount, and he showed to them where is the mass grave. And these students, among them, a big part of them were Jews, and they said Kaddish alone in the mount. And for these students, they always told me it was a changing life day, because we were the first one to say Kaddish for 2,000 Jews killed on a mass grave in the middle of nowhere. And so I think these millions of Jews deserve respect, dignity, and also deserve a prayer. Otherwise, if it was nothing to kill 2.3 million Jews, why to protect Israel today? Why it's important? It's half of the population of Israel. So we cannot accept to build Poland, Ukraine, Russia, Belarus, Moldavia, Lithuania, all these countries on mass grave of Jews and Gypsies, because otherwise it means it was nothing to kill them.
A question, Father. When you go there to these communities, if you could speak a little bit about the research you do in terms, you mentioned archives, the research you do before you come into a community, as well, could you also speak about, are you received with hostility? Are you received, is it a catharsis for these people to share and to speak to you?
So what we do is that we first investigate the Soviet archives, because in 1944 the Soviet reopened the mass grave of the Jews, made excavation sometime, take picture, interview the neighbors. It's more than 10 million of pages. After we have the German Archive of Justice for any German who was involved in the killing. We collect that in Paris, we translate that. It's why it takes a lot of money and energy, because we are 29 full-time. And we build 5 village per village, and we begin to build the map of the killing. And we know before going if they killed 2 families or 10,000 people. And after, when we arrive, we send the people one day before, people that we work for us who are locals. They are Ukrainian, they are Polish, they are people Russian, they are very dedicated. And they go in the village and they knock at every door. And they say, they ask, where are the old people? And when they find somebody very old, say, were you here during the war? And if the person says yes, say, were you here at the killing of the Jews? If says yes, you can help us, because we are looking for this mass grave. We came from France to find that. Do you accept to speak in front of a camera? And I would say 99% of the population says yes. Because, it's the first time they speak. One man, he told me, I'm so happy. I have 1,500 Jews in my gardens, and nobody came back since 42. But the first question they ask, are there Jews in your group? And because a part of them don't like the Jews. So we always say no, even if sometimes somebody is Jew in my team. And after we make a long interview, we don't interview only about the war, but also what was the life before, where was the synagogue, where was the schools, how was organized the city, and what was the connection between the Jews and the non-Jews, so that we remember the past. You must know also that many farmers, old people, still speak Yiddish. One lady, she said, I would like to make the interview in Yiddish. I say, are you Jew? To me, no. I said, why do you want to speak Yiddish? She said, because I worked all my life in a family who was speaking Yiddish. She was from Crimea, I remember. So many times they know what is a matzah, they know what is Pesach, they know what is a Kippur and all that. And suddenly we arrived to the killing and they explain what they did. Sometimes it's purely, one man, by example, he saw a big extermination, he climbed on a tree with two friends and he saw everything. Sometimes it's very moving, and I will finish this series of questions by a very difficult interview we did. It was in a small village in Ukraine, and one man, he told me, they have killed all the Jews in my village except Anna and his child Itzrik. He was 6 years old, Itzrik. And he said, I was the same age, so we stayed 3 months together. We played in the snow, we were like friends. And suddenly the Germans realized they forgot Anna and Itzrik. So they didn't come from the big city for 2 Jews. So they phoned to a neighbor who was German origin, and they told him to kill them. The neighbor was what we call a Volksdeutsch. It means a Soviet, originally German.
Volksdeutsch.
He came with a carabine, and he asked to kill Anna and Itzrik. He brought them in a beautiful field of sunny flowers, where the German killed all the Jews before. And our witness was a friend, so he was hidden in the grass to watch. And he saw that Hannah was begging not to be shot. But the guy shot her from a bullet in her head. At that moment, Itzrik realized her mom was dead, so he tried to run away, and he was walking like that not to be shot, 6 years old. It took 5 times the Volksdeutsch to shoot the child. And after he undressed both to take the belonging, and he burned them with sunny flowers with all the Jews who were killed before. And we were in beautiful day of summer in a huge field of sunny flowers. So when we came back in the car, it was not the Jews, it was Anna and Itzrik. So I remember we came back to the city, 2 hours in silence, nobody was speaking, because as I say, I don't work to find 2 million Jews. I want to find the family vice papier, to find Itzrik, to find David, to find Gloria, because they assassinated people one by one. And the families who ask me, nobody asks me, where is my million? They always ask me, where is my mom? And so if I succeed to stay after 15 years, because it's difficult to do that, it's because we are looking for one person each time. Because each person deserves dignity, respect, and prayer. And so I would say we do that to give back the debt to their families. So the first thing for me is when a family finds back, I was so happy. So happy to say, they found back where they are from and where is their grandparent. Also to reconnect them to the Jewish people, because this population has been cut forever. In no museums they are shown strongly. Mostly we show the camps and we forget these 2 million Jews. And also I would say we have to fight against the deniers. So it's why we establish evidences in every place to show it's true, because tomorrow when the last survivor will be dead, it will be so difficult for the young Jews, the young non-Jews also to carry this memory.
Father Desboise, we want to thank you.
Thank you so much.
And we want to express our gratitude, not only on behalf of ourselves, but of our nation, and for the generations, the thousands of generations to come. You've given a memorial to those who had no memorial.
Thank you so much.
And God bless you and all the great work that you are doing.
Thank you, and Shabbat Shalom to you.
Shabbat Shalom.